What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so continuing on our journey with the hunt for Wolverine, we pick up now with Weapon Lost. And again, this is kind of cool. So for those of you guys who are just joining like the Hunt for Wolverine concept, the Hunt for Wolverine story, what this basically is it's four-issue miniseries, so 16 issues total. And it basically covers the Hunt for Wolverine from 3 different perspectives, right? Because all that came out of the Hunt for Wolverine one-shot, where basically you ended up learning that like the original Wolverine, the classic Wolverine, has basically been resurrected. And everybody's trying to figure out where he's at. And so we originally covered Adamantium Agenda, I think, which dealt with like Luke Cage and Iron Man and those characters. This switches over and initially begins with Daredevil meeting with a guy named Frank McGee. Now, Frank McGee was one of these characters that Marvel introduced by Charles Soule, that was designed to capitalize, at least I'm pretty sure it was Charles Soule, whoever wrote the Inhumans stories, which was designed to capitalize on the aftermath of Infinity. Thanos, who fought Black Bolt detonated the Terrigen bomb and has spread the Terrigen mist throughout the world, which began waking up all these Inhumans. Marvel in turn followed that up with Inhumanity and then Inhuman, and that was designed to go through and basically tell the story of like all these new Inhumans that are waking up. It was the early stages of Marvel's attempts to like replace X-Men with the Inhumans, which we know proved to be disastrous. And so with this whole thing happening, Frank McGee was one of those guys. He was one of those individuals who was woken up by Terrigenesis. Now, there came a point when he basically left and then he went to go join the Inhumans and became part of their special security force, and then eventually left after his partner was killed. And so what this did is it led to him working alongside Daredevil to try to expose Wilson Fisk, who had been elected to the position of mayor in New York. And that's actually kind of a cool story. Mayor Fisk, if you guys haven't read that yet, that's a cool story. There are some stories that come out of Marvel Comics that I never cover, and I just read it for the sake of having it on my own. But still, what we end up doing is having Frank basically revealing this stuff to Daredevil, that he's got like huge files and huge databases on like a massive amount of the superhero community. Now again, if he was just a regular street cop, he probably wouldn't be able to say this. But going through and reading through all those files, he memorizes them all. And so because of that, his mind is like this almost, near infinite database of information. But the problem here is that when Daredevil approaches Frank and says, look, what we're looking for is Wolverine, that's when Frank's just kind of like, oh, because it's not just a small time thing. It's not literally like a fishnet you throw out in the city of New York and then you rake Wolverine in over the course of like 2 or 3 days. This is a global thing. It's across the world. He could be anywhere on the planet. And that's one of the things that people tend to forget when it comes to Logan, is over the years, he's best known as the guy who just pops his claws and rips things up. But a lot of people tend to forget he has decades of experience when it comes to like stealth and guile and espionage, ninja tactics. If he wants to disappear, he will disappear. And so what they end up doing, the two of them, they actually go and they travel to visit with and meet with Misty Knight. Now, Misty Knight, the reason why this works is because she's the other half of the equation, right? There'll actually be a 4th member who'll join their group. But one of the things that people also tend to forget about Misty is, yes, she's a private investigator, but she made a lot of contacts with the underground when she was a cop, and she's maintained those contacts as a private investigator. Now, when she did lead the newer version of Heroes for Hire that you saw during Civil War, a lot of that stuff came to bear. Like, when you had Colleen Wing and you had Misty Knight and you had Shang-Chi, like all that came to bear, and using like her various tactics, contacts, and so on and so forth, especially when Tony Stark came to her and said, I'm looking for Captain America, he's underground, your job is to find him. That when it comes to Misty, she's a very, very valuable resource in Marvel Comics. And so literally what this turns into is all 3 of them kind of working together and then literally taking off, and they end up going to New Jersey. Sal's gonna take offense to this because they make New Jersey look like it sucks. I'm curious about this. For those of you who have lived in New Jersey, or you live in New York, or whatever the case may be, how do people in New York view New Jersey? And how do people in New Jersey view New York? Like, do people in Jersey hate New Yorkers? And do people in New York hate people from New Jersey? I have no idea. Let me know, because I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of curious what you guys, how that whole thing unfolds. But what they're doing is they're basically traveling to like this rundown ramshackle house that Daredevil can't see into because of all the electromagnetic interference. And we end up finding out the person they're meeting is a guy by the name of Cypher. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Cypher is an old school character. He goes all the way back to New Mutants number 13, I think it was, in 1984. He's old school. Cypher has the ability to basically decipher any language, like any language he hears, he can pick up on and learn it. Now, Cypher has like a weird and tumultuous history. In the late 1980s reshuffling of the New Mutants line of comics under Louise Simonson, they killed off Cypher in New Mutants issue number 60, and he stayed dead for over 20 years. He didn't come back until X Necrotia in like 2008, 2009, when you ended up having like the return of Selene, and it was in the newer X Factor comics, X Factor Volume 3, and I can't remember the exact issue off the top of my head, but he ended up making his return. But what Cypher's been doing all this time is putting his abilities, putting his mutant power to the use, and trying to like understand the internet, trying to basically figure the internet out, categorize it, quantify it, and make order out of it. The problem is that the internet is the last bastion of unadulterated free speech without consequence, meaning the internet is in and of itself an absolute cesspool of madness. And so because of this, what Cypher's been doing has been basically trying to like understand the mind of the Joker, is really what this comes down to. And it's quite literally driven him to the point of almost complete insanity. Now, his mind's not totally broken, but what this does is it turns into like an addiction for him. Because you have like Daredevil who throws his baton, they talk some sense into him, they take him out to get a hamburger, but he's constantly jonesing. Like he's constantly jonesing for access to the internet. He has to always be on the internet all the time. Otherwise, he'll end up losing his mind and going insane. And you know, just like literally it's his fix. It's his heroin, his crack cocaine, it's his drug of choice. And so once they bring him out, they say, fine, we'll let you have it in small doses. And so they give him a smartphone and they say, your job is to find Wolverine. And he starts combing through all these different things. And what we end up finding out is there's actually like a kind of website that exists out there that does nothing more than highlight like Wolverine sightings. Like, this is where I've seen him, this is where I've seen him, all these different stories that people post online. And it really does get kind of bonkers. If we're being honest with ourselves, it really does get kind of crazy. And so from here, because there have been all these sightings, what this does is it turns quite literally into like a cat and mouse game. It is Wolverine who's constantly on the move, and it's, you know, basically this group of folks who are trying to find him. Now, what they end up doing is traveling out to Saskatchewan, Canada. And the reason why is because while all this was going on, they had basically picked up on kind of like a homing signal, like an SOS more or less, like a cry for help. And zoning in on it, they had basically gone to this location only to find out that everybody in it is dead. And so where you end up having Misty Knight, and you have Daredevil, and you have Frank, and you have Cypher who respond, what this does is it turns into Cypher going back into the house to do some investigating and to actually steal one of the phones of the guards, only to have his throat slit by Wolverine. And so it gets kind of crazy. So then from there, you basically have everybody who just kind of comes racing back, right? Like as soon as that happens, Daredevil picks up on the increased heart rate of Cypher, realizes he's not there, and then realizes something happened to him. So racing back to the house, this leads to an all-out fight between Daredevil and Wolverine, when Wolverine just like takes off running and Daredevil chases after him. Now, this is when things begin to shift, because what we end up finding out here is this is not actually Logan. This is Albert. Now, Albert is OG. I mean, he's not like super OG. He's not New Mutants OG, but Albert's old school. So when Chris Claremont was writing the X-Men for, you know, since from like 1975 going up until around 1992 when he left, he wrote like a ton of stories, had like a lot of plot threads going on, but Chris Claremont leaving was like that. It was sudden. It was just like peace, and he was out. That was basically, there was no real notice or anything. And then Jim Lee followed shortly behind him. But when Claremont left, there were a lot of plot threads that were left hanging. And so the role of like various writers, Scott Lobdell and Larry Hama, really Larry Hama I think was an editor-in-chief at the time. There was a point in Marvel for like 3 years, going from the late 1980s into the early 1990s, I think, when they had no editor-in-chief. There was nobody running the show except for the people all the way at the top, which kind of explains the comic bust of the 1990s, at least for Marvel anyway. But what ended up happening is the idea was we have to wrap up a lot of these loose plot threads. And so what we ended up having is back in Wolverine Volume 1, issue number 221, I think it was, you had the introduction of Albert. And Albert was created by Donald Pierce. Now, Donald Pierce was a holdover from the Claremont era. Donald Pierce was introduced as a member of the Hellfire Club. He was part cyborg. He hated mutants. Eventually, the Hellfire Club was defeated. He was ousted and joined the Reavers. And the Reavers were just like this group of cyborgs, is basically all they were. And so when that happened, there came a point when he wanted to defeat Wolverine. And so what he did is he created 2 artificial intelligence robots. The first was Albert, and the second was LCD. The problem with this was that with LCD, I want to say that one of the guards of Donald Pierce left the machine running. But whatever it was that happened, she basically became self-aware. And when she did, she realized that her mission was to find Wolverine and then detonate herself if Albert couldn't do it. And so what she did is she woke Albert up and basically made him self-aware. And the two of them went together as like a father and a daughter, more or less. That was kind of like the relationship that was formed, was a father-daughter relationship. So they survived. That goes into the comic bust of the mid-1990s, and they basically vanish. Marvel's just kind of like, forget about it, whatever. And then now they've resurfaced again. And so LCD is gone somewhere. No one knows where she went to, and Albert's convinced that somebody took her from him or something along those lines. But it's just one of those weird things where you have like the robot version of Wolverine, and he's actually pretty, I mean, he's pretty comparable to Wolverine himself, far more dangerous than like Daredevil is or anybody like that. I mean, he's got a bit of a healing factor, he's got metal claws and so on and so forth. The long and short of what you would expect for somebody who is basically an imperfect clone of Wolverine in cybernetic form. And so where you end up having Daredevil who tracks him down, Daredevil's able to get the upper hand. But the reason for this is because Albert's not looking to kill him. Albert's looking to get out of there and go find LCD. If this was a fight where Albert was looking to kill Daredevil, no contest. He would have torn him to shreds. I mean, it would have been an absolute massacre. And so that's the only reason Daredevil's able to get the upper hand on him. And so this basically leads to Cypher intervening and then shooting Albert in the back of the head and then taking him out. And so from here, they end up transitioning over to, you know, flying back and trying to just kind of figure out what leads they can grab from there, because at this point, it's been nothing but dead ends. When they thought thought they found Wolverine. They didn't find anybody at all. So Cypher starts searching on the phones of one of the guards, and when he does, he ends up finding out that there was basically an apartment whereby one of the quote-unquote Wolverine sightings was seen, and the guy who's, this was his entire life, social media was his whole life, ended up basically bailing out. And so at the same time, when he took his post down, all the information was gone, everything about him just vanished off the face of the earth. When they get to the building, not only is he dead, but then you also have Frank who kicks in and says, look, this guy, he works for some kind of agency. He works for a group called Sotera, at least I think that's what it's called, Sotera, but he works for like this clandestine organization that exists out there. Now, as far as I'm aware, Sotera is a new creation, a new organization. And so it gets kind of cool because you end up having like these various guys, these various people who were saved by Daredevil. The rest are basically rescued by Frank and Frank McGee, Misty Knight, and so on and so forth. But when he starts analyzing these bodies, what this does is this leads directly into them traveling to the safe house of Sotera. And when they enter there, they're met with like a level 4 kill team. Now, for those of you guys who don't know in Marvel Comics, the level 4 kill teams, that's a general designation used by Marvel Comics. And that's designed to basically say like, this is a kill team that's like of the highest tier, they shoot to kill. When they're sent in, everybody dies. Like everybody gets killed. Innocents, the guilty, the whole 9 yards. It's one of those things that you use when you want to like cleanse an entire facility. You sit in a level 4 kill team and take them all out. But I wanted to kind of mention that because the way that this kind of goes down and the way it's explained, it almost seems like a particular team, like a particular organization that's sent in to take things out, like the Hand or something like that. Not the case. It's just a general designation that's used here. But for the most part, they're taken out by like Misty Knight, they're taken out by like Daredevil and Frank and so on. So you end up having Cypher who breaks into their computers, which are actually deleting themselves as he's trying to search through all their files. And when he does, he ends up finding like all these database recordings, all these things where it's like all these extreme acts of violence and terror and so on that have been perpetuated by Sotera, and they have their hands on Wolverine. And when the question is asked, what will you do for us? Wolverine's response is, whatever you want. And so what it looks like is that Logan has, for whatever reason, been thrown into the mix with this extreme organization that's taking out people left and right. Now, we don't know what the motives behind Sotera are. We don't know what their basis is. They could very much be like the Hand because of the fact that the Hand is an organization that Wolverine has had a lot of involvement with. For those of you guys who don't know, the Hand was a group that was originally founded by Kagenobu Yoshioka, and that goes all the way back to like feudal Japan, when you had various farmers and poor members of society who broke away from like the existing Japanese empire at the time, and then like went to the mountains to go practice their own form of martial arts, ninjutsu, different things like that. And because they were all scattered and they were just, various tribes existing in a generalized location, Kagenobu brought them all together and christened them all the Hand. Now that capitalizes on the fact that the Hand used to worship the great beast back in the day, which is actually the basis behind Shadowland. Shadowland was so good, but dude, like I'm really hoping they do that in Daredevil season, and like some Daredevil season. Dude, Daredevil season 3 is like 2 days away. Man, that hype train, man, that hype train. I know they're doing Daredevil Born Again. We need to cover that. We need to cover Daredevil Born Again for Daredevil season 3. I keep forgetting about that. Anyway. Anyway, when it comes to that kind of organization, the Hand, no pun intended, they have their hands in everything. But this group may be exactly like that, which is how it appears to be. Sotera seems to be almost exactly like the Hand in the sense that they're not like based on ninjas and magic and resurrecting the dead, but they are like an extreme clandestine organization designed to take out various threats and different things like that. So it is kind of cool. But yeah, if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.